Welcome to Danja Digital. This is Dana. I am your chief storyteller at Danja Tells, and in this week's digital newsletter, I am tackling one of your questions, and this week's question is, I struggle with story structure and writing short. Any advice for plotting short stories to make sure readers don't feel shortchanged? How do you make them a full story with only 80 to 100 pages? What are the key story arc and plot points that need to be addressed, touched on, hit? Now listen, we are not going to cover all of that in 20 minutes, or maybe I will, but I do know that I am going to get you going if you are interested in writing a short story. I may even be able to give you not only a few tips, but also a little bit of a challenge for yourself if this is an area that you want to be proficient at as a writer, especially if you want to be proficient at it as a writer. So if you're interested in hearing what I have to say about how to write a short story, well, then stick around. If not, don't forget to thumbs up the video, subscribe to my channel, and do me a favor, visit danjatells.com and subscribe to my newsletter so that you can get updates about Danja Digital, or Danja Tells too. So if you're hanging around, then stick around and I will see you all after the introduction. Welcome inside Danja Digital. I am Dana Pittman. I am a USA Today bestselling author, and I'm a developmental editor. I am a story nerd. I love all things about story structure, and I love writing short stories, and it's something that I have diligently worked at, and it's for several reasons that we can always talk about in another episode, but I think our question for today is loaded enough. So let me first say that there are no announcements. We are rolling along as planned, getting into the holidays, and like you, not only am I working, but I'm, finishing up any last things, and I am planning for 2021. And how is it going for you? Are you too planning for your 2021 schedule, or are you planning to write a book, more than one book, thinking about a book? I'd love to know in the comments so that I can see if there's ways that I can support you. Also on the blog, I do have another side, like one-on-one video that's coming up for subscribers to my newsletter that you won't see here if you're looking only on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe. And the first episode of that is coming up, and it addresses the importance of finding the right editor. And so I did that one impromptu because a client call really kind of stirred up some things that I wanted to address. So if you're interested in seeing that, make sure you are subscribed at Danja Tells. So I don't have any announcements as far as client new releases, even though I think there have been some. If they don't email me, then I don't know. All I can do is congratulate them and share them, and that's pretty much it. I think that's it. Okay. So let's get to the question. I'm going to read it again, and I want to start this off with a caveat that writing short to me is harder than probably writing a novel. And just because it's fewer words doesn't make it easier. I think you have to, like this question says, accomplish the same thing with fewer words, and that is what makes it the most challenging. But I will start off with this overarching tip, and it is think short, right? I think one of the biggest challenges that I had was wrapping my brain around, is this idea conducive to a short story, to a short form? Will I be able to do it justice? And there was a subpart of this question that kind of addressed, so that readers don't feel shortchanged. And I feel like even when readers love a story, if it's short and they love it, sometimes they still feel shortchanged because they would have loved to take the whole journey with you, but that's just not how you see fit to do that story. So I think it's a better gauge is for you to think, can this form satisfy this idea? And I feel like once you start getting that, at least for me, it just seems like everything else was figure outable. I know there's an author that says that. I love that word because it seems like it's complicated enough, easy enough, and understandable enough. Like, okay, I can figure this out. But it is a train wreck if your idea does not marry with your form. Train wreck. There's no way to fix it. I mean, you can fix it, but it's a lot of work to fix it. So with that said, I'm going to read the question, and then we are going to get into the meat of this response. So the question is, I struggle with story structure and writing short. Any advice for plotting short stories to make sure readers don't feel shortchanged? How do you make them a full story with only 80 to 100 pages? What are the key story arc and plot points that need to be addressed, touched on, hit? Thank you for submitting this question. If you have a question, don't forget to click the link that's in the description box or in the notes for this show, which is episode 7. You can also see the link to submit your questions. So let's start from the beginning. How do you take a full story and put it into a short story? The first thing let's talk about is knowing that there is no set length for a short story. Like all of the other story lengths, you're going to get different ranges. Some people say it's anywhere between 3,000 to 6,000. Some people go up to 7,500 words and still consider it a short story. Whether it's a short story, a novella, a novel, those ranges differ. For me, I usually consider a short story in the ballpark of 6,000 words. And when I'm plotting, I'm usually thinking somewhere in the range of like 3 to 5 chapters. And I personally, again, this is just me because I've never assisted someone with writing a short story per se, but we have done a lead magnet. I've done lead magnets with clients, and sometimes they are short stories, and also have done prequels with clients, and sometimes those are short stories as well. So I usually say they can be somewhere in the ballpark of 6,000 words. That's the way I look at it. Now, there are some people that they don't break them up into chapters. They really just leave it long form and then maybe just partition the scenes out. So if I had to give you tips on what are the key arc and plot points, it's going to be we're going to start the basics of beginning, middle, and end. But if you get that overarching tip that I started off with, is this a short story idea? How are you going to begin it? How are you going to handle that middle, that messy middle, that middle build, the meat of your story? And how are you going to handle your ending? If you are a follower of the story grid method, you will know that when you sit down to kind of think through your short story, I would strongly suggest looking at the 5 commandments of story structure, which is your inciting incident. You want a turning point, progressive complication. You want a crisis question, a climax, and you want a resolution. And for a short story, you may find that you just have those 5 C's. Now, in each one of your scenes, you want it to adhere to those structural truths as well, but you can pretty much like structure your whole short story around those 5 C's. Now, I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper, because I don't think it's always about someone not being able to shorten their word count. I think it may be about how do we ensure that it is cathartic and satisfying for the reader. And that is where your commandments come in, and having a solid beginning, middle, and end, and it's underscore, and it's those 5 C's are like your skeleton of everything. Okay, so how do you get to that place? We know we can do the 5 C's. You can make your story fit in the 5 C's, but how do you get to the point of being able to write the short story and then feeling confident in your ability to write your short story? The first thing that I suggest you do is read. I specialize in romance editing, but of course I edit other works. But for romance writers, I honestly feel like there is no reason at all that you should not be subscribed to Kindle Unlimited. Let me tell you why, Dana. Thank you for asking that question. You should have an active, engaged reading life. And being a part of Kindle Unlimited makes it so that you can easily ebb and flow. You can check out market trends. You can see what's happening, even if it's just on a smaller scale, enough to kind of ground yourself. So I suggest, if you know you want to start writing some short stories, read short stories. Don't read 1, don't read 3, read many. Read in your genre, read outside of your genre. If you find some of your favorite authors, read them as well. And what you are reading for is, number 1, the short story idea. What is the idea that they are conveying in this short story? What is the theme or the truth that they are conveying in that short story? And can you identify the foundational structure? Can you see the inciting incident? What kicks the story off? Can you see the turning point, progressive complication? Where does the story go from being their normal world to now things shifting? And you should be able to pinpoint that shift or that turn in events. You know, what is the crisis question? And listen, if you're doing a short story, you're not going to have a whole bunch of things going on. You are not. You don't have time for them. If you do, it's going to be muddy and it's going to be messy, and that's not good work. Okay? Is there a climax, which is the decision that the character makes and the fallout from the decision that the character makes? And lastly, is there a resolution, a clear resolution? Is there an ending? Now, when it's a short story, especially if you're talking about in romance, it doesn't mean like, you know, the end, but it's a resolution to the initial conflict that is introduced in this short story, in this little box of a world that you've created. So you want to look at those stories for those things. How does the author handle them? Is there something that you maybe would do different? And again, keeping in mind, what is a short story idea? What is the short story idea that this author tackled? And how would you rate their the way that they did it? And if they were able to kind of satisfy you as a reader. The second thing that I suggest, so first is to read. The second thing that I suggest is to write. Have a clear goal when you write. Sit down, write out the 5 commandments. How does your story kind of fill in those commandments? Even if it's just really quick on paper, you know, write them out. And in the beginning, I feel that knowing what those foundational structure and actually writing it out, or saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to start. This is my inciting incident. Here's how it's going to progress. Here is where that progression is going to turn. There's going to be a pivot. Like knowing kind of those things, then when you write them, it gives you a better basis for doing the third thing, which is to analyze. Analyze your work. And when you're first starting out, you will find that you're going to be analyzing it against your analysis may be somewhat more like a comparison in the beginning, because you're trying to look for those things that I said before. How was the idea? Did I adhere to the structure? Did I move? Did I answer the questions? Did I close all the openings? And in a short story, you don't want to have a lot of openings. You don't want to have several subplots. One plot, one thing. I always say short stories about one thing. One thing. One major thing is happening in this character's life. And when you analyze, how did you do? What can you do to make it better? And you really have to keep going through these 3 steps. Read, write, analyze. Read, write, analyze. Read, write, analyze. Now, one of the things that I did as a writer is last year I decided that I joined a project with 9 other writers, and we wrote 10 short stories in the year of 2019. I did it because I wanted to master my ability to identify, to craft, and to write short stories. And I did. Because it's something that had already had interested me. And as a writer, I feel like it's a great tool to be able to try different genres, to test your voice, but in a working format. I have in the past taken several classes on pulp fiction, short story writing, read pretty much all of the short story writing books, James Bell Scott, like all of the books. Why? Because I love structure, but also because I wanted to wrap my head around the short story format. But I can tell you that it took work. And even when I did that project, I did not sit with the short story length for the entire 10 books. I went with the novella length because that just fit well for my overall series structure. But it took the same type of diligence because it is still something to write a book in 15,000. That series averaged around 16,000 words on average per book. It's something to write in 16,000 words in what I would normally write in 60 or 70. Right? It's something about that. There's a difference. So in closing, I would say challenge yourself to write short stories. I would say, you could even say, I will write one a month, or I would say writing one a month. It's not that bad. You can look at it, look at your structure, write out those points, write it, read it, edit it, and then analyze it and see how you stack up. I will also say in the beginning, you may want to get in the habit of writing out those 5 commands and knowing how your story will satisfy those commands, just so that you can keep yourself focused and kind of pull in those reins to keep yourself from running free. I will tell you just as the closing part of this is that you will find certain things that you have to learn how to tackle in your own way, like the lapse of time, or if you only want to limit it to a scene. Will you have multiple characters? Will you have multiple points of view? These are all things that are stylistic choices, and sometimes it's that the story dictates them, and other times is that your grasp of your tone in your style in your audience will start answering those questions before you ever sit to write out those commandments for that particular story. I hope that I have done this question justice. You can ask me any additional questions in the comment section, either here on YouTube or I prefer on my blog, and you can find the direct link to this episode in the description box. Please subscribe to my channel, thumbs up this video, and subscribe to the newsletter. I look forward to bringing more editions of Danja Digital to you, and of course answering your questions. If this was able to, it helps you in any way, let me know. And if there's any parts of it that you would like for me to dive into deeper, because this honestly can be a long, drawn out process, because I love writing short stories. Love. They are perfect for building your newsletter. They are perfect for filling in the gaps if you are a person that writes a little slower than the romance market sometimes make you feel like you should do. And they're also perfect for exploring characters. So that's all that I have for you for this edition. Let's see the question that we will tackle in the next newsletter. How do you take characterization to the next level? In other words, if I have created an okay character, what can I focus on to make people really deeply care about my character? When you all submitted these questions, you held no punches, and I love this question. I will answer it in the next edition of Danja Digital. I will see you all hopefully sooner than later. Take care and goodbye. I've been down so